Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Paddle Monster Zoom video. In this edition, I'm really grateful to be joined by Chris Murphy of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Those of you who are avid Facebookers and members of the Paddle Monster Challenges group might recognize Chris as someone who last year paddled every single day of the calendar year. Started January 1st, went right through to New Year's Eve the next year. Um, paddle Christmas Day, paddle when in good weather days, paddle in bad weather days, paddle on days where I'm sure he felt great, and on days where maybe he didn't feel so good. Probably paddled, well, definitely he would have paddled on his wedding anniversary. So, these are the types of, this is a commitment and an accomplishment that I think is pretty incredible. And Chris has been good enough to join us today to talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about his journey in paddling, how he got started. He's got a business in the sport, which I think we'd like to hear about as well. And so, Chris, I thank you for joining us. Welcome to the podcast, and congratulations on what you accomplished last year. It's quite an accomplishment. Tell us a little bit about that. How do you start? With the idea, or did you start with the idea of wanting to paddle every single day of the year, or is that just something that happened once the ball started rolling?
Well, first of all, welcome. Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be talking to you. As I told a friend, I turned 40 last year, and I was racking my brains for honestly something dumb and silly to do for my 40th birthday. And it occurred to me I could kind of connect all the areas of my life, paddling and everything else, and goal setting, as well as turning 40 and kind of making that the goal for my 40th year, saying, you know what, let's go out on a limb and let's do something that is a little bit uncomfortable. Let's set a goal that is, achievable and yet is somewhat out of the normal realm of goals, like something you have to do every day. It doesn't seem like a lot day to day, but when you add it up, it becomes quite the task.
I can agree to that. I mean, I've paddled a lot in my lifetime, but I've never managed to paddle every single day of the calendar year. And I do think I get an out because of weather, because we certainly have some days here in the winter that don't lend themselves well to paddling. But I have to tell you that even if I was paddling someplace where it was warm and sunny every day, I don't think I could do it, because as much as I like it and enjoy being out there, there are days where I just, I can't do it. Like my body needs a break, and my mentally I need a break. So I can really appreciate, what an amazing accomplishment it is, because there are, I think there was always days where, either you're busy and with real life things and it's hard to fit it in. Like you're a family man, right? You've got a couple of kids and
Correct. I have 2 kids, and as of late, I've actually been paddling a lot later, just so I'm trying not to paddle during family time, if you will. So a lot of my paddles as of late have been at night, and so.
Yeah. So, I mean, it becomes more of a paddling in the dark in the winter. It becomes more of a grind than a pleasure sometimes, I mean,
Indeed.
right. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like I said, it's just quite an accomplishment, and huge respect really to you for being able to do that. Again, I appreciate the scale of it, because I'm a guy that paddles a lot, and this is something that I know myself. As much as I love it, there are days where I just can't do it. I need a break. And when you set a goal like that, 365 days is a long time without a break from it. And when you're working around kids and family
Life in
commitment,
general. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot. So, I mean, again, congratulations and huge respect, for doing that. Now, as I understand from reading your Facebook page, you're not finished either, right? Like 365 days was the beginning, of
That
something, but I read a post where you were talking about extending it much longer than that.
well, once you hit 365, I consider myself, if you've ever heard of a gaming term called a completionist,
Mhm.
I consider myself one of those, like, well, while you're here, you might as well just continue on. And at
Right.
365 days, you're only 135 days away from 500. And that's like a
Right.
nice round number.
Exactly.
I like
Right.
round numbers.
Right.
But then I figured you get to 500, and then you might as well, now it's just a downhill slide. You've already crested the hill. Now you're getting less and less days to
Right.
1,000. And I
Right.
feel like 1,000 is truly uh,
It's a much rounder number than 500, right?
yes. I've also had, and I can't take all the credit for thinking of paddling every day for a year. I actually got it from a woman. The name is slipping my mind as we speak, but she's over in Washington in Gig Harbor, and she
Okay.
did this challenge a couple of years ago, and I was always in awe of what it would have taken me at the time to think of, like, oh my God, going on the water every single day. And I mean, I feel like she lives on the water, but even in Chattanooga, it takes me 7 to 10 minutes, depending on the lights, and driving to get from my house to a put in, and then be physically on the water if everything's going well. But I was just thinking about, what would it take to do that? And so here I was. There it
Well,
was at turning 40.
well, that's quite a way to. It's quite a thing to come up with when you turn 40, and I hate to think of what you're going to have to do to outdo this when you turn 50 or 60.
Oh
But
Lord, at that point, I
yeah,
couldn't even imagine.
yeah. But
One of the many things you get when you paddle every day is a lot of, I bring songs and musics with me and that kind of stuff. But a lot of time it's just, dead silence, especially at night, that kind of stuff. So you have a lot of head time, and you're doing the math, like, okay, well, what's this? And then how many more days to 1,000? And then how many more hours, miles, minutes to this goal? What of my overall time spent paddling? It makes me think of that 10,000 hours.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Book, and
Yeah.
I remember very distinctly sitting there in my head paddling along, being like, well, let's see, if 1 hour is, so I'm like doing out the math in my head as I'm paddling along.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I think of that as well. The 10,000 hours to be an expert at something. And over the last number of years, I've managed to hit close to 3,000 kilometers in a year, which is about, let's just say, approximately, 10 kilometers is an hour, more or less. It's a little bit more than an hour, actually, but let's just use that as a round number. That means in a year, you're only paddling 300 hours.
Yeah,
And so how many years does it take you to hit those 10,000 hours? It's like
that,
crazy, right?
that was the
It's,
exact same
yeah,
conclusion that I came
yeah,
to. And
yeah.
I have, I'm using software that logs minute by minute, and so at the end of the year, I mean, I could tell you it was exactly, I have an exact, well, according to this thing, folders, 11 days, 13 hours, and 59 minutes of logged trips last year.
Wow.
And so I'm doing the math words back on that. I'm like, oh man, I'm a ways off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, I look at
Yeah.
it and I'm thinking, like, how many years do I have to paddle to be an expert? Like, it's just, it's, it's crazy. I actually think that the problem with that 10,000 hour theory is twofold. One is that it's a pretty random number, and it can't be applied equally to every different activity, because some activities are extremely complex. And I actually think paddling is a pretty complex activity, because it's a complex full body sport movement. It's also something that you have to do equally well on both sides, and then
True.
you need to be able to do in a variety of conditions. So I think there's a fair amount of complexity to it. But and I think there's some activities which are much less complex, and so would they take 10,000 hours, or just as a much more complex activity would? So there's that issue. And then the second thing is just the scale of 10,000 hours. Like, when you actually, it does, 10,000 hours is a number. So it seems like a lot, but it doesn't seem like that much when you don't have an idea of how much it actually is. But when you do something like you've done, and you look at how much you've done, and yet how far away you still are from that 10,000 hours, it makes me stop and think that, well, I mean, to think about it, if I do approximately 300 hours a year, it takes me 3 years more or less to do, and this is just really rudimentary bad math. It takes me 3 years to do 1,000. So it's going to take me 10 times 3 years to do 10,000. So that's 30 years. And I question whether that's a bit of an overestimation of what it takes to be an expert, because I know paddlers in sprint canoeing and kayaking who, started paddling and 8 years later were on the podium at the Olympics. So if that's not an expert, I don't know what is, right? So if they could do that in 8 years, they're doing it well under the 10,000 hours. But
I think that brings up a good point. It's not just the volume of hours, it's the quality of
exactly.
the hour, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
So
it totally makes sense.
if you're just humming along, some days, honestly, I just hum along and interact with all the surroundings that Chattanooga has, or wherever I'm paddling happens to have. And some days I'm actively, working on stroke technique. I'm working constantly on moving my feet. I'm always trying to get better, just walking all over the board and doing silly stuff. And I used to have a reputation for falling in just about all the time, but I feel like I got that reputation fairly, but I also feel that I fell in a lot because I was always one of the ones to see, well, how close to that line could I get?
Pushing the envelope.
And then pushing it, either in any situation really. And then that would ultimately lead me to find the line by coasting over it by accident. And
But that's how you learn too, right? Like, I mean, I'm always telling people, if you're not falling in, like especially in rough water, if you're not falling in, you're not learning, right?
Agreed. Yeah. What's the old adage? It's calm seas never made a strong sailor, or there's an old maritime thing saying that if you sail in fair weather, you're never going to be
you're going to be a fair weather sailor. Yeah. I like that. So you one question I always ask people when we're talking about paddling is, invariably it comes around to, how'd you get started, and what is it that you like most about paddling?
So I tried to think of my actual starting point in paddling, and I can't quite put an exact time and date on it. I just know that it was local to Chattanooga. It was when L2 board shops had their setup, and I remember renting a couple boards from them and just absolutely loving it. And that ultimately led to more purchasing and yada yada yada. But I want to say that was circa 2009, probably 2010. I mean, it's been I think I've only been doing this for a little over 10 years, maybe. I think somewhere. Well, I guess it's 2023 now. I always forget that. So 13 years.
Right. I mean, a good chunk of time. But I mean, clearly, in that, if you're still doing it and you're doing it to the degree that you're doing it, and you've started a business in the sport, one could say that, and you mentioned it earlier, like you're juggling family time with paddling time, and it's the kind of thing where like I get accused of, well, paddling's taken over your life, and I always come back with, well, no, it hasn't taken over my life, but it's a very important part of it. And I like to think that it complements my life really well, because you get the opportunity to have some really healthy me time when you're on the water, which is important to and that can make the other aspects of your life better, right? Like you can be
highly agreed. Alone time and self-reflection time is huge, especially when you're on the water and it's midnight and there's nothing you can see except reflections, and it's
these are special moments, right? And it's a healthy activity too. So like even if you're taking time away from your family, you're doing something for your health, which is important to your family, right? So I always I like to say, like, no, it doesn't take over my life, but it complements it. Um, but clearly, you've gone from a few getting out in the water by renting a paddleboard to somehow your journey has taken you to a point where you're paddling every day. You own a business in the sport. Um, so if you can, just describe that journey a little bit for us.
So the business came about. I used to work as a project manager for Tennessee Valley Authority, and it was a very nice job, a very cushy job, very well paying job, and it afforded me the ability at the time to have all these hobbies. And so I had one paddleboard at first, and then I had two paddleboards, and then I had a paddleboard and a something else, all this other stuff. And when I finally decided to leave the corporate world, just because it was just kind of weighing on my soul, for lack of a better word or phrase. I had all these paddle boards, and it was summer. And so I would go out on Facebook and say, hey guys, all my local friends, I would just say, hey guys. At the time I was big into the CrossFit community. So I had athletic, semi-young friends that were up for like adventures. And I say, hey guys, let's go paddleboarding. And they're like, well, we can't go under the water. We don't have our own equipment. We don't really want to rent it. And I was like, you know what? That's cool. I have all this extra equipment. Let's just go out. Let's just go have a good time. Let's paddle around the island. Let's, go explore some of these creeks. Let's just go around and play around. And so I started doing that summer. And I think at the time I had a fleet of like 6 boards at one point.
Wow.
Out of
Yeah.
nowhere. It was just, it was my personal board, but then I had a faster board. Then I had a larger board so I could take my daughter at the time. And then I had another larger board so I could take other friends that were larger and that kind of stuff. And so, you need a specific craft for every single specific, task. And that's how your garage gets filled up. But
Right.
so I would start doing that, and my friends and I would go fairly regularly, and I never asked for money at the time. It was always, I'm inviting them, let's go and go have fun. And they would bring snacks, or they would invite and they would pay for food afterwards, or drinks, or that kind of stuff. Until one day, one of my friends was in contact with their Bible study or church group or something like that, and they inquired. They were having a picnic, and they wanted something fun to do at the picnic because it was at one of the lakefront parks. And they had come to me and said, you have all these paddle boards and you're clearly okay with letting other people use them. Would you mind that if we paid you, I think it was like $600 for the day, just show up, you can eat all our food, drink all of our drink, sit there and just give a couple lessons and just keep an eye on the people, and we'll pay you. And I said, that's when the light in my head went off, and I was like, oh,
Right.
I can actually make money doing this, instead of just taking my friends, which I had no problems at doing, mind you. But it became a business idea in a time when, since I had just left TVA, I was doing my resume, I was going through interviews, and I was doing the cost benefit analysis of like, I have all this equipment, so it's a very low startup cost for me. I just need to get out there and get licenses and insurance and that kind of stuff. But beyond that, I mean, I basically hit the ground running in 2014 or 2013, and then 2014 got all the appropriate business licenses. Once I did more research on how much money you had to make to order quality, all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I can honestly say I basically fell into paddleboarding by paddleboarding, or fell into a paddleboarding business by paddleboarding with friends.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. Like, that's really cool. I mean, you were building the stand-up paddle community before you had like a business in the sport. And I think a lot of people, well, myself included, we have a business somehow connected to paddling, and when you do, have got really good motivation to try to grow the sport because it indirectly grows your business. But when you're getting people out on the water just because you want to share the experience with other people, or you want them to be able to share an activity that you enjoy so much, you're building the sport without for the purest of reasons. And that's not to suggest that if you have a business, what you do isn't pure, but like, it truly is like the purest of reasons, like, hey, just come on out and paddle with me. That's fantastic. Let me ask you, how many of those people that you first took out have since purchased their own equipment or are regular paddlers?
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Most of those people, I would say, either have their own equipment and to follow up on the story, I started doing that and I started renting boards. And at the time, I also had a CrossFit gear and equipment store as well going.
Okay.
So it was it was a good crossover. It was athletic people wanting to do interesting stuff. And so
Right.
it fed into now. So all my friends eventually got boards and equipment. And over time, we started what we called the local paddle pack,
Okay.
was just like a normal Wednesday night social meetup group with a very short paddle. And it was more of a kind of a place where you could get and meet, local paddlers. What I liked about it was that, what I still like about it is that most of the people bring their own equipment. I'm okay renting stuff, but people bring their own equipment. We're all happy with that. It lets you go somewhere, and like if you're, especially as a newbie, if you have no idea what to buy in the paddling community, there are so many options out there, and especially with nowadays with inflatables and Amazon, and I mean you can just you can throw a dart at a wall and maybe land somewhere with what you need. Just going out with people, getting real one-on-one feedback on things like what they liked, what they didn't like. It goes a long way into helping people like get into the sport properly with the right equipment that they'll appreciate year over year over year. I personally say, there's nothing wrong with like the Costco special boards, I call them. If they're used once a week and they get you on the water and that's what you want them for, that's awesome. I can't complain about that. But if you honestly want something that maybe you do want to go on longer trips, or you find that when we go on longer trips, you're struggling to keep up despite your fitness level and, all that kind of stuff. It's groups are a good way to share knowledge effectively or quickly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I see that up here a lot where people, they get into it with some really cheap equipment. And as you say, it's great because it gets them out in the water, but probably half of those people that start off with a Costco board or like like a really cheap paddle, and I often think paddles are even more important than the board, in terms of having something that's got some quality to it. At least half of them end up pretty quickly upgrading to something that's better quality. And so, again, like if you can sort of do a little bit of research beforehand, and the best way to research is to try or to talk to people who have experience, right? And who've done a lot of that trying for you and can share their experience with you. You can really, you can end up saving some money. I mean, I know it's a lot smaller purchase than buying a car, for example, but no, people tend to research a purchase like a car. And if you're spending a significant amount of money on a paddleboard, and new paddleboards can, especially if you're looking at race boards, they can be pretty expensive actually. Who does that without doing some research? So, and I do agree that, like, we've got a group that I paddle with. We call ourselves the Paddle Morons, and we've got there's probably about 20 people in it, and we don't all get together all the time, but we're on the water. I say pretty much every day, but like we're certainly not 365 days a year. But there's, at minimum, there's one or two other people to paddle with. On a big day, there might be 15 people to paddle with, and we can share a lot of information. One of the guys has a shop and sells stuff, and so he's always tapped into the latest equipment, and he can let you try things, or you can get his advice on things. And a few of us ride different brands, so we know what kind of what the pros and cons of different pieces of equipment, and then we're always encountering these newbies who launch from the same spot that we do, and you end up letting them try your equipment, or like, or you're talking to them about equipment, or they're asking you about equipment, and it does kind of, I think sharing that kind of knowledge is really important, and then it's also, what I've found, whether it was my canoeing days or whether it's been stand-up paddling, is it's really nice to have, like, a social side to your paddling.
Oh
And
yes.
right,
Oh,
like, I mean, then you would appreciate, I'm sure you appreciate this, if you're going out in the dark at the end of the day to get your distance for the day and to keep your consecutive day streak alive, you're going to really appreciate those days where you have people to paddle with.
oh
And
yeah.
right, like, the camaraderie of it, I think, is something that is hugely important to me. I wake up in the morning and it's like, there's the first thing I try to do is go paddling, and I look forward to it for the simple fact of being on the water, but I look forward to it to see the guys, and uh, I consider myself blessed to be able to have a group to share what I love with.
I completely agree. I think the end of the year paddle that was planned was basically the first 10 miles of Chattajack. We call it the Coolidge to Suck paddle. I want to say there was a dozen, maybe more individuals on the water. 20, my girlfriend says 22 people on the water. But even more than that, like you're saying, this community. So we ended up at the end of the Coolidge to Suck paddle. There's this wonderful local bar and restaurant that has just adopted us all. And
Okay.
he's just such, the owner is such a nice
Yeah.
guy. His
Yeah.
name is Charlie. If you're ever in town for Chattanooga or for Chattajack, go to River Drifters. All the locals know it.
Okay.
They know it by name.
Yeah.
And
Good to
Charlie's
know.
an awesome guy. But
Yeah.
he by the time we got there, the 22 people had ballooned into like 50 or more. And we
Wow.
basically took over the entire outside section of his bar. And
Yeah.
as much as they were celebrating me and congratulating me, he was coming out and also saying, guys, I'm really thankful for your community and honestly to be included as he does in the community.
Yeah.
His shop actually also rents boards and kayaks, I believe, too. But I mean, it was to the point of there's 50 or so people, and he was so happy to have us all there at the end of the year that he basically bought everyone a free drink.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It
Yeah.
was an absolute blast and a really good showing of what the Chattanooga community is, both socially and people who didn't want to do the 10-mile paddle, or it being the middle of winter, basically New Year's Eve, didn't want to get on the water kind of stuff. I mean, we got lucky in that the weather that day was perfect.
Right.
People in dry suits were stripping off the dry
Yeah.
suits
Yeah. Yeah.
halfway
Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
halfway through the paddle. It was
Right.
that nice of a
Right.
end to December. It was fantastic. So
Oh, that's amazing. So yeah, tell me a little bit about the Chattanooga paddle scene, because I've been to Chattanooga, I have to think, 6 times for Chattajack, and loved every time that I've been there.
it's
It's
a wonderful outdoor city. It's
yeah.
So of all the places that I have been, and I have crossed the country, I think half a dozen times now, it's got just about everything from mountain biking, climbing, hiking, running. There's cave diving, believe it or not. There's hang gliding. We have spots for hang gliding and that kind of stuff. But also the waterfront, the factor that we live right on the Tennessee River, and the Tennessee River is accessible enough to most people that it's another, it's just another form of recreation that we're lucky to have. And then since it's dammed at certain levels, you have it's all part of the Tennessee River, but you have these large lakes that there's local downwinding groups that when it's firing, and
Wow.
depending on the direction, you can actually stage yourself in one of two positions and really have like a good run, as them you've seen on the Paddle Monster group.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of this, and I try to reconcile that with my experience of paddling that relatively small
30.
stretch. So, like the 32-mile stretch between downtown Chattanooga and Hales Bar. But It's I understand that it's a small segment of a much larger, area that you can paddle on. But I never realized, just how many people, like when you're on the starting line at a race like Chattajack. For anyone watching who hasn't done Chattajack, I I strongly suggest you do it.
And even if you don't do it, volunteer. Go a year before, volunteer. Be at the end, specifically be at the end if you can. Be like a board takeout person. You'll never have so many people so thankful to see your face.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
hand
exactly.
out chocolate milk, hand out
Yeah.
medals, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting to say that because I know a couple of people that through Paddle Monster that I ended up coaching, whose first experience at Chattajack was as a volunteer, and then they got into racing it.
We volunteer every year, and we find that a good percentage of the people, just through word of mouth. I think, and I don't think this was always the case. I think Ben just had a really good collection of friends, and people are always, especially in the paddle community, I've found people are always willing to chip in and do their part to make these amazing races happen.
Right.
But I think the formula that is kind of spit up as a result of all this is people tell people, if you're not ready to do the Chattajack, that's fine, but just volunteer 1 year.
Yeah.
Be there at the start, be there at the finish, see all this amazing energy and all this happenings and going ons, and if that doesn't make you want to do it,
yeah, you're right about that, because that race has such an incredible vibe, right? Like whether being there the morning of, or even the day before, and seeing all the boards get spread out on the lawn, being there that morning, and in the dark, and getting your board set up, and then having the band play and the drums going while while everyone's getting on the water together at the same time, and then being on the water between the bridges and looking to your left and to your right and seeing that you're one of over 500 different boards or paddlecraft out on the water. It really is pretty amazing. And just the vibe around that race is amazing. And then when you get to the end, as you say, it's so nice to see these smiling volunteers who will lift your board out of the water when you don't have the energy left to do that. And whenever I drink a chocolate milk now, I think of finishing Chattajack.
And I hate chocolate milk, and it's the only time
it tastes good at the end of that race, right?
Oh yeah.
And then we just the other day, one of my buddies that I paddle with, we were talking about finishing the race and then putting your board up on the ground, by your car, coming back down, going into the general store, and getting a bag of chips so that you can start to get some salt back in your body, and and maybe a beer. And then going and sitting on the dock and watching other people finish.
Joining the cheering. Oh man.
Exactly.
I have so many people who know me just because for a long time, I bring cowbells to all the races, and just kind of just to be obnoxious, for lack of a better word. But but it's appreciated when you're paddling along, someone screaming at you to go. I always felt that energy, so I try to give back as much as I can.
100%.
I run out of my voice, and so the bell works better.
I can tell you, as a guy that's raced it, it's appreciated when you paddle by, for example, Raccoon Mountain, which is is that about 2/3 of the way into the race?
19 miles, give or take.
Okay, so almost 2/3 of the race. And again, for those of you that haven't done it, and you should. You're looking at there's a reservoir on top of a mountain, and so you're looking at the basically the concrete wall that is the outflow for that hydroelectric facility, and so it's a big parking area, and it's a big open area where people can cheer from, and they're lining the wall there, cheering for you. And if you're basically 20 miles into a 30-mile race, you're tired at that point. And you need a little encouragement. And it's, these people aren't just cheering for friends and family, they're cheering for everybody. And it's just got such a great vibe to it. I always think the funny thing about Raccoon Mountain is they're giving you that cheer and that little boost just before you turn into what is usually like a a long headwind stretch, right? And
It's the
the
Tennessee
most
River
grueling
Gorge
part of the race.
does what the Tennessee River Gorge does, what the Tennessee River Gorge
Yeah.
wants to do.
Yeah.
And so it could be headwind followed by a 180-degree turn around a bend with more headwind, followed by headwind and headwind and headwind. You know, it depends on the day. It depends on, you know, whatever the river gods are deeming that moment. But yeah, it's always fun to pass that point, and for sure, it's a beautiful spot actually.
It really
That's
is.
actually my favorite part of the river. It's the least populated, so you have all this nothing but, you know, the gorge itself with trees lining these large hills and mountaintops. I wouldn't say mountains, you know, large hills, I'd say.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, they look like mountains. They got to be like a, you know, like what would you say the elevation is from water level? Like 300 or 400 feet anyway, right? They're pretty high.
Oh yeah, that at least, yes, yeah.
I mean, you definitely feel like you're in a canyon when you're doing this race. It's extremely scenic. I mean, it you know, I think one day I'm going to go and do it again, and I'm just going to cruise it, and I'm going to just like look around and enjoy the scenery, because you don't always have a chance to do that when you're focused on the tail of the board in front of you. But
Go 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 go, yeah. The
yeah,
go mentality takes
yeah,
away from a lot of the beauty. And so
yeah,
so we're going back to the Chattanooga paddling scene. A lot of people
yes,
get
yes,
together and paddle sections of that river over and over again, just for practice and just for fun, really. But there are so many parts of that river that, you know, if there are segments probably from Suck Creek, that first 10-mile mark, up to probably I think it's called Sullivan's boat dock thing. It's on the left after Raccoon. It's like 4 or 5 miles down. That's probably the most scenic part, in my opinion, of the river,
right,
and probably one of the most beautiful paddles. And you know, you'll if you're quick-eyed, you'll see everything from otters, beavers, snakes. We've seen eagles flying overhead during those segments. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I highly would recommend, if someone were to come into Chattajack and they could bookend a couple more days in before or after, and the weather was nice, go
right,
go
right.
check those out.
Well, I mean, that's amazing. And I'm, you know, just this talk about the paddling community there, and the size of it. You mentioned, you know, having 50 people at the restaurant after your New Year's Day paddle. It makes me wonder, like, I've never actually thought of this before when I'm standing on the starting line looking around at all these other craft, but like, it makes me wonder now, how many of the people that are racing that are local racers? Like, there's probably a significant number of people that are you know, relatively local.
I feel like the number as the total entrants go up, the number goes down. Obviously, we can only it is fun to talk to say, though, that a lot of the local paddlers, the local paddling community, has grown in leaps and bounds in years recent, not only from people moving here, but also for new people picking up the sport.
Yes.
I mean, you know, COVID was honestly a big disaster. I believe it to be for most small businesses, if not just for the fact that you had to now operate in a completely different social environment and figure out how to communicate messages and still get, you know, do all these things, but without being face to face with a person.
Right.
It was a learning curve for everything. And I think one of the good things that did come out of it, like you said, everyone seemed to get a paddleboard or a paddlecraft or that kind of stuff. So there's no lack of people wanting to get onto the water. But now as restrictions and as people are becoming more comfortable in general in public masses, people are actually now going back to, I guess, the other options, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we saw the same thing here. It was, you know, like with restrictions, gyms were closed. Any indoor activities were closed, like sport leagues were closed, like you know, like the arenas were closed for people that like to play pickup hockey, or you know, the YMCA was closed, so you couldn't, you know, go and play, you know, your men's league basketball or whatever. So there was a huge increase in bike sales. But for the longest time, like, you couldn't buy a bicycle in the Toronto area, and then and paddleboards, and it got a lot more people paddling. And last year, there were still, I think, a lot of those people paddling. They hadn't, started to go back to the gym as much. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen this coming summer. But I do, like you have a group in Chattanooga that meets regularly and does things together. I did another interview um, for Paddle Monster on Zoom not too long ago about a group in Toronto called Buddy Supping, and they basically started as a result of the pandemic, and it's just like a hookup thing in the greater Toronto area. So Toronto's a huge metropolitan center, about 3.5 million people, and there's about 3,500 people that are members of this that they hook up for group paddles, and in the winter they're doing curling and all kinds of winter activities together too. So they've made a lot of friends by virtue of initially just having like a drop-in type, hey, are you paddling? You're looking for people to paddle with. We're going out at a certain time, and so people joining them. And I just think that's amazing, because I think of my experience in all the years I've paddled. The best thing about it, and as much as I love being on the water, the best thing about it is the people I've met.
Oh yeah.
And the experiences I've had with them. And I'm sure it's the same for people everywhere. Like it's just paddling is a very social activity. You can paddle and do a workout, but do it in the company of somebody beside you, and you can still interact. It's not like you're swimming and looking at the black line on the bottom of the pool and bubbles. So it really is wonderful. So tell me what proportion of the time, again, I look at I'm sure you don't do the Facebook posts where I was paddling in the dark alone at like 10 o'clock at night. I see a lot of, the paddling on Facebook where you're with a group and people in different craft too, right? Like outriggers and surf skis and,
So Chattanooga has has recently had a huge explosion of sit down crafts, essentially. Originally for I want to say up to 2017, 2018, it was mostly paddling craft. Honestly, it was mostly paddling craft, and the majority of them were hardboards. It's actually, you need to go that far. And now the paddling craft has become the majority of the paddling craft are inflatables for most of the rec paddlers. And then people will also have race equipment that is less likely to be seen on those Wednesday night social paddles. But we do, right. There's a group that meets here that does Thursday night paddle racing. Cool. Recently, there's been a push to do Tuesday night kind of training, interval training, that kind of stuff. And then obviously the weekends are open to, we get together in those large groups, and inevitably somebody is like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? And plans are formed and solidified during the week for the weekends, 10 mile, 20 mile, whatever paddle that they're going on.
And how, like, I know, like, Atlanta's what, like about an hour away? Is there people that come up from Atlanta and from other locations to paddle with the gang at Chattanooga?
Quite a bit. And we have regulars that come as far as from Florida. I mean, June pops his head in here, from time to time, and that's not a short drive.
No.
There are people that if they find a reason to come through Chattanooga, they'll usually tack on an extra day or an extra weekend, and most of the paddling community here uses that as an excuse to say, hey, let's go do a 10 miler, let's go here to here and then go back to River Drifters, or go somewhere else for lunch or brunch or whatever. And so it's quite amazing.
So that's what I'm getting at, is like, it seems to me that you've got a really vibrant community of locals, but you've also established a reputation as a place where like there is a paddling scene. And so people from I asked about Atlanta because I know of a couple of people down that way who, when they're training for Chattanooga, they'll go up and do segments of the river, and they're never doing it alone. They're always hooking up with locals to do it. So it's like not to the degree that you have it there, but when I was paddling canoe, we had a pretty successful canoe club, and we used to have athletes drop in from across the country, um, for a couple of days at a time or a week at a time to just to paddle and train with our group at the club, and it was super fun to have people drop in and visit you to paddle, and it makes you feel really good about your paddling community or your paddling scene when people from out of town want to be part of it.
Yeah, well, when they take the time and effort to say, "Hey, I'm going to be in town. Would you like to paddle, or could we arrange a paddle on this date?" And the beautiful thing about this town is if maybe one person's not available, but there'll be 4 or 5 more willing to be like, "Yeah,
Fantastic.
I can swing that schedule, or let's do this instead, or that kind of stuff."
Yeah.
So
Fantastic. Fantastic. Hey, so like, I'm just thinking about people that have never been to Chattanooga before. So like I've said it a couple of times. If people haven't done Chattajack, but you're a racer, it's a race you really ought to experience. And I'm directing that suggestion to not just people in North America, but people who might be watching this from Europe or anywhere else. It is
actually,
a
funny that
really
you say
unique
that.
race.
We do rentals for Chattajack, race rentals for Chattajack,
Right. Right.
and I specialize in mostly we have a fleet of stand-up boards, but this year was the first year someone rented our Tempest OC2, and in that stacked mixed OC division, I think they came in second or third.
Wow.
Third, yeah. And they botched the start. According to them, they weren't clear on the whole drifting boat thing, so they were
Right.
like
Right.
pointing the
Right.
wrong direction, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
had to fight every inch to get back, and they still managed to podium out. It just, don't let the gear and the other situation be the holdup, because there are, even if you don't rent from us, there are so many people local to here, or so many people just traveling to here, that if you have a friendship, you have a connection, reach out, ask, say, "Hey, I know you have a similar board. Would you mind throwing it on the truck? I know you're going there.
Mhm.
Take it along for me," kind of stuff. I mean, it's doable. It's
The
quite doable.
only thing is, the only thing is with Chattajack is you got to plan ahead.
True.
Registration, if you're wondering, has generally been May 1st, and
At
it
midnight.
opens at 12:01 a.m. Right,
Yep.
so you've got to get in early. You can get on a wait list, but if you don't get on in that first day, you're generally on the wait list.
Correct.
So if you're thinking of doing it, circle April 30th on your calendar and plan on staying up past midnight so that you can register. But it is just a race like none other, um, and like I said, the vibe is amazing. It's a significant challenge, but if you paddle regularly, you'll make it. And my next goal, if and when I go back, and I hope to do it this year, it's going to be to sort of learn a little bit more about the local community while I'm there. I've always gone with blinders on a little bit, and I think it's getting to meet you has been amazing, because it's I want to drop by the shop, and
Yeah.
but I just think it's one of those cool places that you should put, or cool races too, that you should put on your list, because it's a beautiful location, and it's a race that's it's grown into something that's really huge. I mean, it's beyond just the 32 miles itself. It's sort of a big event with a big party and a giant tent after the race, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just it's pretty special. It's pretty special. So I'm just looking at the questions I had written down here, and I think we've covered a lot of them. Um, just maybe let's just get back to just briefly, those days when you're out there alone. What is it that you like most about being on the water? I guess first and foremost, and then um, I mean, I know that there's going to be days where you probably wake up and think, like I don't know, day number 300 or maybe day number 250, maybe, you're well into it. And, like you've gone too far to stop and waste the 250 days that you've done, but you're still a long way from the 365. Like, and you're tired, or you got a cold or the flu, or it's just the weather's horrible. What is it that keeps you going? And on those days, do you still find enjoyment in it, or you yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm asking the question the way I want to ask it, but I think you know where I'm going.
I think I get where you're going. For starters, I was a lifelong swimmer. One of my personal regrets was leaving the ultra competitive team just in the middle of high school to do high school things, for lack of a better word. Looking back, I could have been a college level, easily a collegiate level pool swimmer. But I've loved water all my life, period, end of sentence, in and around it. The story goes back is that my parents took me to the YMCA in Long Island for whatever class, and I absolutely refused to get in the water for whatever reason. So finally someone hucked me in the water. Yeah. And then they were about to jump in after me to get me prepped and ready and for the class. And instead of freaking out, I just swam to the other side of the pool and got out. And they were like, "Oh, I guess he doesn't need swimming lessons. He's fine." Right. He seems to be acclimated with the water enough to if he's annoyed enough to get thrown in or to be away from us, he'll just go to this old end or the other side of the pool and get out in the deep end and that kind of stuff. So, but it's been a lifelong love of mine, just being in and around the water. If I could be an animal, it'd probably be like a sea otter or a river otter. Yeah. Something fun, playful, and that could kind of just spend their days floating if they wanted to. Yeah. In terms of paddling, what keeps you going? I've found that even on the most horrible days, even when I'm feeling absolutely sick and disgusting, and there's been a couple of days when I've had like a cold, or I don't think I had COVID this year. But there were several days that I had a cold or just wasn't just feeling down in general, and getting on the water, ultimately for me, the movement, the exercise, and if it's usually, and if I'm not feeling well, I'll be honest with you, I'm usually pushing this off and pushing this off and pushing this off, and the day is getting later and later and later. Yeah. And so it's like 8 or 9 and I have to get in the water and it's dark and it's cold, or it's but it's very calm. And so get out there. You don't really want to be there, but as you start in with the athleticism of it, you're warming up, your body's warming up. You're taking in the calmness of the air, the calmness of downtown Chattanooga. Some of my favorite night paddles are just bathed in the light of all of downtown Chattanooga's, and how it's on either side of the river, and you can just paddle along, and there's these little reflective lights dancing on the water, and then the bridges that go over. We have 4 bridges that go over, and the dancing lights and all that kind of stuff. It's very uplifting, to say the least. And I have found that there's really never been a bad day to paddle, irregardless of the conditions. And there have been some days where I've been, maybe, I wish I had either planned it better, or like even with my best planning, weather-wise, time-wise, it was still, a slightly sketchy situation. And thankfully, in my goal setting, I was wise enough to say, you need days that are easy outs. You need to be able to say, you know what, I just need to click a mile out and back. Just do half a mile out, half a mile back. You're done. You're out of the water. You're out of the whatever, the torrential downpour, the thunderstorm, whatever it may be. You need that, for a goal of this magnitude. You need days where you can say, you know what, today I'm just going to do the bare minimum and be okay with that. But even on those days, I've always found something in the paddle that was worthwhile. It was just uplifting. It's nice to just be on the water. It's nice to just, you get kind of used to those sounds that the paddle makes, the water makes as it's moving by you. I've gotten very acquainted with, there are several families of, I guess, beavers that live in and around the downtown Chattanooga area. And
Okay.
especially at night, they're very aggressive of their home. So they'll follow you around and like kind of flip slap their tail.
Yeah.
So I've kind of named them because they're, at least one is kind of a jerk, but we meet every so often, every few nights.
Yeah.
He'll come out and he'll see me, and I think I'm pretty easy to identify at this point.
Yeah.
My nighttime paddling gear has over the course of the year has been settled. I have a really nice Viacobi vest, and I have a flashing lamp on the back and a small lamp in the front.
Right.
So it's I would like to think that he recognizes me or she.
Yeah.
is paddling out to greet me, if not to be annoyed, and then they'll usually follow you around the island until they feel that you've cleared their zone or whatever. So it's interesting.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool. I love just the way you describe paddling at night with the, I have to say I haven't paddled at night a lot in my life. But what I can liken it to is when you're paddling in the fog, or when you're paddling in the snow, and like the snow especially, it becomes very quiet, and because the snow is absorbing a lot of the sound of the traffic on the street, on the bridge above you, whatever. And you'll see people walking across the bridge, or you'll see people along shore going about their busy lives, and you're out there alone paddling. And as you say, the sound of the paddle going in the water, the sound of the board, as it accelerates, the little sound of the nose wave off the front of your board. And it's kind of like this magical moment, because you're doing what you do, and everyone else is busy doing what they do, and they might see you, but they're not, like it's not like you're everything's going on around you, but you're not doing anything for them. You're out there strictly for you, right? And it's and you're finding solitude and the peace, of the clarity in your mind that comes from that, while there's the hustle and bustle all around you. I just think it's a special feeling. And I think you described it really well. Let me just ask you: do you ever have people, when you're coming off the water, do the people ever see you, and when you're coming in off the water at nighttime or whatever, or as you're paddling by, if they're walking by, do they ever comment to you about what are you doing?
Yeah.
You
I've gotten to the point where I'm good at acknowledging comments, and depending on what state I'm paddling in, if I'm going for exercise or just going for relaxation,
right.
If I have a focus, I've found that if I, obviously if you quickly whip your head to every conversation while in the water, you're going to find yourself
Right.
in the water a lot more than you are
Exactly.
going to be standing up.
Yep.
So I've gotten to the point where I can acknowledge, and then my brain will give me a couple minutes. Okay, let's at least finish your stroke. Let's get a solid, let's be stable before we turn and look and address. Don't just immediately have to look. So in Chattanooga, you have all those bridges that are above you. So
Yeah.
the number one thing is there are people shouting from you above as they go across the bridge. And
Right.
so, that while paddling, I've found is another one reason to start back pedaling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Right.
I kind of
Right.
slow
Right.
down, brace my paddle, and then I'll look up, and it's usually some kids or a family, and they're,
Right.
curious as to what this crazy person is doing. But I mean, I've seen it all. I've met random friends on the side of the river. I could just be doing a loop, and I've met neighbors. I've met other paddlers who are on their bicycles.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that your paddle group up there does something in the off season. Ours developed this group called the Pedal Pack.
Right.
So it was
Okay.
a bicycle group,
Right.
paddling group. When they couldn't paddle, they decided to bike everywhere.
Nice.
But I've encountered groups like that. I've encountered friends. I've encountered neighbors. I've encountered lots of fishermen, lots of
Yeah.
fishing people. All sorts of stuff. Since the downtown has that riverfront walk, and then especially
Right.
on one side, where we launch for Chattajack, all of that is usually open to people. And then on the opposite side, you have Coolidge Park, which a long stretch of that actually has a waterfront park pathway. And then you'll usually meet a lot of people just going about their evening there as well. Always curious why there's somebody out in the water in January.
Well, here's what I like to think about. Like, I don't tend to paddle in the dark. We tend to get on the water at 9 in the morning, and we're kind of off by 11. But just I know that when we're coming off the water in the winter, for example, we have to cross like a fairly busy pathway where people are out walking or walking their dogs or whatever, and we see in a given, well, like over the course of a month, we might see the same people like a handful of times. And I'm sure that the times we didn't see them was because they walked by while we were out on the water, not when we were finishing up or launching. Our schedules were just a little different. But it's kind of fun to see these people, from day to day, and be able to recognize them when you say hi to each other. But I often think, like, it's kind of cool that here we are, we're out there, and every morning when they go and do their walk, they're either seeing us as we launch, or as we're coming in from our paddle, or they're walking along and they're looking out on the lake and they're seeing us out on the water. And it's, to a degree, you're a little bit of a fixture. You're part of the scenery, and so I can see that, you're out there so much on that river that, like, you got to be part of the scenery. Like, just think of the number of people that, have seen you out on the water, and oh, there he goes again. There's that guy, and I think it's just it's a really cool thing to think of, because it speaks to the consistency of what you're doing. That people might think that, honestly, there goes that guy again. Like you become part of the scenery. It's really cool.
I had a friend many years ago describe me as the rogue paddler. That if you went down under the Coolidge Park Bridge and you spoke my name 3 times, I would like magically appear.
Yeah. Awesome.
I understand it, and I didn't really take it in at that point, but thinking about it now, yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, you become a fixture to the point where they associate that part of the river with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, actually, if you look on Google Maps, it's really funny. When they redid the Google Maps for the Coolidge Park turnaround, I had illegally parked my van for the 100th time right at the turnaround.
Yeah.
And you see the big old silver van we used to have with the paddleboard trailer just parked right there alongside the river.
Oh, that's awesome. So. That's awesome. The only thing that would be better than that was if there, when they did like the aerial shot, like on a Google Maps or something, they could actually see you paddling on the water. That would be
lovely. Yeah,
I would love
to see one like that for like Chattanooga not Chattanooga, but Chattajack, or any of the races, the local races. So I mean, you can normally catch us on Wednesdays, and there have been several instances where photos have gotten back to me and us as a group where people just assumed it must have been like a wedding on the water or something. So we have a tradition at the end of the season to always do we'll call it like the paddle prom. We'll all get dressed up in Goodwill, nice attire, but Goodwill nice attire, nothing that we're gonna worry about losing, and paddle out. And so there's people in suits and ties and dresses. There was one year a guy dressed as Elvis was with us, and so that's the year we got pictures back, and everyone on land assumed that there was a wedding, and people were somebody was getting married by Elvis on the water. No, it was quite a story.
That's pretty cool. Is there a webcam in downtown Chattanooga that focuses on the river,
but I'm working on it. We have one of the newest members of our paddling group was purchased a riverfront condo, and I have already propositioned. I'm just trying to figure out the logistics of putting up and maintaining financially and physically a webcam basically outside of their window. They have like an adjacent view, especially of McClellan Island where we meet. And I was thinking of having like the McClellan Island beach cam or something, and
Yeah,
just have a general ongoing cam that looks straight at where the groups normally meet to
that would be
meet and
super cool.
socialize,
Yeah,
or have a picnic or what have you. And
yeah, yeah. I mean, that would be super cool. Like, I mean, if there was the reason I'm asking is because, like, just imagine if there was a webcam and, you know, say that you had, I know that you're often paddling in the dark, so we probably wouldn't see much on the webcam, but,
you see
for
this
those
little
days
flashing
where,
bulb.
like, if you were out on the water, like, if there was a period of time where, say, you're out on the water every morning at kind of 9 a.m. or something like that, people could actually, go to the webcam and see you paddle by. We do have a harbor webcam where I paddle, and I can't tell you the number of times where people, like, somebody in the group can't make it, or they've been out of town, like they've been in Florida, or they've been in, like somewhere at a different location, and they'll go on the webcam, like at 9 o'clock, and they'll actually take a screenshot of us all paddling out onto the lake, and that
That's
would be
really nice.
super.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Last thing, I mean, we've been talking for a little over an hour, so I think I'll respect your time and your busy life, and we'll wrap it up in a second. But do you have any like social media, like Instagram or anything like that, that you want to share? Like, if the people can
Yeah.
follow you, or
Yeah. Chattanooga Paddleboards as a business has Facebook and Instagram. I personally have a have paddle will travel, kind of spelt funny, but
okay,
I can send you all that information that I've been kind of documenting this.
yeah,
You mentioned before the at some point you gotta realize that not everyone wants to hear your day-to-day paddle routine,
right,
and so for a while I was posting daily, semi-daily on the Paddle Monster, and I realized that I thought to myself, these people are crazy just like me, but I don't think any of them are. They don't need to see this every single day. So I've started backing it down and kind of like batch posting, if that makes a sense.
right.
Trying to give, and especially going into this year's challenge again, make it to 1,000. But more importantly, the scary part of it, since I've already done the 365-day challenge, that doesn't really scare me. The mileage doesn't even scare me either. The 1,000 miles isn't, in the grand scheme of things, there are people out there doing 20,000 miles probably in a year. So I bumped up the mileage a little bit. What I really set my goal on this year was a single distance paddle segments, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to do every week, I'm going to do at least one long paddle equal to the week number of the year.
Okay, that's
So,
cool.
1 is easy, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all of
Yeah,
those
you're
are
starting
easy.
off slow in the winter, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But by the end of the year, the last few are going to be 50-mile paddles. And
yeah,
while it gives me pause now, I feel like if I'm doing this up until that point, I feel like, I'll get to 49 and be like, all right, I did it. 50 isn't as bad as I thought it would be. And
yeah.
then I would do the 50 and the 51 and so on and so forth.
Well,
But
I think too, like what will make it easier, and it sounds like you have the group, that the community that would support you in that, is when you're doing those long paddles, get people to go with you, or get them to join you for part of it.
yes,
And right. And I think, I can imagine, with the role that you've played in your community historically, like getting right from day one, where you're, carting your boards around and letting, lending them out to people to use, to everything you must do for the community now, that there are going to be people that are going to sort of be as excited about your goal and what you're doing as you are, and people that you paddle with. And so I would imagine that you shouldn't have a hard time finding people that are, will, in one of those long paddles, like if you get to December next year, and you're looking at doing 49, 50, 51, 52 mile paddles, that you'll be able to sort of have a team that can support you in those, and paddle segments of it with you, because that'll make it go a lot faster.
agreed.
Yeah.
Very, very much agreed. It's actually, I've been thinking about this a lot this year too. by the time Chattajack runs around, I think Chattajack's in the end of October. So it's going to be like a 40 plus ish. And, you know, not one to waste a day. I'm probably going to paddle Chattajack and then kind of leisurely paddle there. Extend.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of that. Like, can you imagine
See you guys later.
racing Chattanooga and then going out and doing another 12 miles?
Yeah.
Like, that's the definition of crazy. But yeah, amazing. Well, like, Chris, you know, thanks so much for joining us today and you know, allowing us to meet you, hearing your story. What I'd like to do is I'll get in touch with you after, and I'll get your social media information, and when we post this on the site, we'll include your, you know, your Instagram and handle and all that kind of stuff, and your business handle as well, so people can follow you. But I'll just close by saying, you know, I would be, if I make it down to Chattajack this year, I would be thrilled to be able to join you for one of your 1,000 days and go for paddle with you together, and you know that I was you know, at least part of the you know, the 1,000-day journey, because it would be an honor.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an honor just to be on here and to talk to you. So I mean,
well, okay. Well, look, I'll leave it at that. Again, thank you. Happy paddling. I just invite everybody who's been watching to follow Chris, and you know, I think you know, maybe too, like, I think there's a lot of people who've gotten into paddling and you know, enjoy it, and have maybe thought about doing some, you know, unique things that sort of stretch their abilities and stretch their limits, and you know, both physically but also mentally and emotionally, as I'm sure it's often done for you. And I think, you know, that your story is inspiring, because I think anybody who enjoys paddling and kind of has thought about doing, you know, something cool, you know, with their paddling. This is pretty, like I said, pretty good inspiration, and it's, you know, I find it quite motivating, actually. You know, I'll be thinking of you the next morning. I wake up and the weather's lousy and it's cold, and I feel like staying under the covers. I'll be thinking about you, and it's going to help me, I think, you know, make sure that I get up out of bed and get out on the water, and don't chicken out and say, I'll make it a gym day or something. So yeah, fantastic. It's been a great experience getting to know you and hearing your story, and I look forward to encountering you again along the way, Chris. Thanks so much.
thank you very much.
Okay, all the best.
Bye.
Take care. Okay.